NSF current and pending support. The National Science Foundation requires that all of the key personnel, all of the senior personnel, submit a list of the funding that they have available to them. That's good for ongoing research projects and for proposals that are out there that have not yet been funded. NSF is looking to identify and restrict any potential overlaps or duplication. It's a great way to check that the science that they're funding is new and unique and novel, and to ensure that the funding dollars are stretched as far as possible. New, the release date was April 1st. NSF has published policy updates for the current and pending support formats. So between now and June 1st, we're still going to utilize the old forms, but June 1st going forward, there will be 2 potential current and pending support formats supported by the National Science Foundation. That will be Science CV or an NSF Fillable PDF. This will be very similar to their rollout of the biographical sketch that we've discussed. Unfortunately, going forward from June 1st, PDFs that have been created outside of those 2 options will likely be rejected, and they will be outside of NSF policy, so we are to avoid those going forward. From June 1st going forward, between April and June 1st, those are still okay. Here's a sample of the new fillable PDF that's coming out June 1st. We're not going to get into the details today. This is just a quick heads up that this is coming. When you have a chance, you can check it out. And there will potentially be training on this form prior to June 1st. But here is a brief sample of it for today, just to take a quick peek. Again, NSF released this information April 1st. This form will be required. 1 of 2, Science CV and this downloadable PDF. And this will be for submission via Fastlane, research.gov, or also grants.gov. Current and pending support, what does it include? Well, it's trying really to capture any and all resources available to the faculty member. Now, I think historically we looked at this from more of a purely fiscal perspective. How much money have they received and from who? I guess philosophically this does change, but technically the NSF has been asking for this recently. And recently they've been enforcing it to where beyond just the typical funding that faculty members have been reporting, they're asking for clear representation of other kinds of contributions to the science, including in kind. And what this really is sort of honing in on is foreign collaborations. And we're going to talk about that in a few slides. But for now, let's just talk about the details of what an in-kind contribution is. This gets a little tricky. In-kind contributions are typically non-monetary support received by faculty. And we have a list here that we're referencing: space, office and lab space, equipment, supplies, and also it includes employees and students. So just a little, some questions come up here, a little bit of confusion maybe even. Well, how do we report that, right? How would you report employees or students? Well, okay, so in-kind contributions that are not intended on this proposal and they don't have any associated time commitment, we don't have to report those, okay? So that maybe clears up some of the problems, right? If it's lab space, you know, that's not a time commitment. Especially if it's not being used for this proposal, then we don't have to report it. But if there is a time commitment, right? If it's going to take the use of a specific microscope or recharge facility, then that must be included in the facilities, equipment, and resources section. Okay, so in this last section here, in-kind contributions are intended for the use of the project proposal being proposed, and they have no associated time commitment, must be included in the facilities, equipment, and other resources section. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so exactly what types of resources are we discussing? Well, let's start with the easy one here on the right, not gifts, right? So UCSD has a definition of what a gift is, and it's basically an irrevocable transfer of funds where there's no deliverables required. The gifts can be designated, but they could be, I guess, restricted for a specific purpose is what I would like to say about that, or they can be unrestricted. But there is not going to be something required in exchange or in return for those gift funds, and they can't take the gift funds back. So those don't have to be reported. But what does have to be reported? Well, any item or service must typically be reported. In-kind contributions now must typically be reported. And then in this middle section here, sources of support. Sources of support include, okay, so we're used to the first several bullet points. Most of us, it's very common to see federal, state, local, foreign, private, and nonprofit funding listed. The industrial or other commercial organizations, we really do need to list those. But the two here, bold and underlined at the bottom, I think might be slight philosophical change for folks, to where we're going to want to list sources of consulting support for the faculty member. And we are also going to list internal funds that are allocated towards specific projects. So if the faculty member has a portfolio of funding, some discretionary funds, if those funds are allocated toward a very specific project, then we would want to list those. If they're not, and that includes startup, right? Startup does not list a specific project, then we wouldn't need to list that. So here is an image of the traditional current and pending support for NSF. This is the one applicable now in April through May 31st. So starting June 1st, this will look different. But between now and then, this is still appropriate. So just to quickly go over some of the sections here, we're going to list the investigator name, the type of support, whether it's current or pending. And when we're putting together our current and pending support, group those together. So we typically list multiple currently funded awards in order, and then after that we would list the pending. We're going to list other agencies if the proposal has been submitted to other agencies. We don't see this all the time. Concurrent submissions need to be reported, and the NSF doesn't look down on it. There's not going to be a negative repercussion for listing it there. It's just noted. That way we have given them the disclosure that is a potential. And then what happens is down the road, we'll be able to accept one or the other of that funding if it's the exact same science. Okay, if we go down the list a little bit here, we see that we list the project proposal title and the source of support. So here for location of project, we typed out the UC San Diego. I'm down at SIO, so we would, in addition, write Scripps Institution of Oceanography. To continue, just a few remaining sections here on the current and pending support page. So we're going to list the total award amount. This is different than NIH, which only requests the direct costs. This NSF request is for the total direct and indirect costs. Also, the total award period covered, it's the entire project period. So here we have referenced a 3-year project period beginning October of 20 and ending in September of 23. Again, that's a little different than NIH, for example, that typically we're listing just a single project period at a time. This is the entire period covered. And then the person months committed to the project will be listed here. That's going to be a little different in the new form, June 1st going forward. They're going to ask for that for each year, but for now, we're still just listing it here in general terms. Calendar is 1.2. That's the person months per year, regardless of actual fluctuations. So here's a couple FAQs. If we were live, we could have a little more fun and do this as a pop quiz, but since it's being recorded, just kind of run through it for you. Can we create our own Word doc and convert it to a PDF as of June 2020 for submission into those systems? No, that wouldn't be compliance. If the current and pending support is prepared in Science CV, does that information automatically link to the NSF systems? Again, no. Once we create that in the system, we're going to have a chance to sort of download and save that document for use as a document we will upload in the appropriate system that we're using for submission. Will non-compliant current and pending support receive an error message in both Fastlane and research.gov? Yes. Documents will be tagged. Okay, so that's fair. We'll get a little bit of a heads up and a warning, which is going to be very helpful. Okay, this should be a pretty easy one. Do we report gifts in current and pending support? So if it meets the definition here at UCSD, then it would not be reported. Do I have to include in-kind contributions in both the current and pending support and facilities, equipment, and other resources sections of the proposal? Okay, this is a little bit tricky and there's some nuance here, but no. Question, do I report startup packages or academic year salary in current and pending support? So I referenced that, the startup packages are not required to be reported. Here is a great example of a caveat that we really need to emphasize and take into consideration. Startup packages from other than the proposing organization, those must be reported. And again, the idea here is we're really trying to capture these instances of foreign collaborations. So if there's a startup package for your faculty member anywhere else besides the current organization, right now we're all UCSD, anywhere else outside of that, yes, we need to report that. Okay, well, thank you for your attention on the NSF Other Support. Next up, we have the NSF Research Protection. NSF Research Protection has become a hot topic of late, although the rules basically have been on the books for quite some time. So since about 1978, faculty have been required to disclose all sources of support, both foreign and domestic. As it turns out, I think we have been pretty lax about this over the years, right? Or conversely, it has become more of an opportunity and a potential for faculty members to receive funding, foreign funding, especially these days, is the hot topic, and haven't been reporting on it. So this is something we really want to keep an eye out for, and please be sure to communicate this to your PIs. It's really important that this information is shared. There have been some folks that have made the news, unfortunately, for accepting funding from foreign organizations and not properly disclosing it. So it's going to be in our best interest to really sort of push on this for a while. International collaboration is essential. It is something that's core to the sort of the understanding that universities have is for the most part we're basic medical, basic research. So we're exchanging our resources and our time and our efforts here in order to publish for free use. The idea is we take in federal dollars, we perform a research activity, and then we share the results freely. We disseminate that as part of the structure of the university. And we want to continue to do that. We really want to be open and collaborative. The thing is lately there have been some situations that have arisen where that same transparency hasn't been equal across the board. And so in the United States, the science has been put at risk. Other governments have incentivized folks from their research organizations to go out and to try to gather as much information as they can. And that's where we need to be really clear on what we disseminate to folks and how we disseminate that information. So one of the things we're really trying to do here is with this NSF Research Protection is to protect some of those researchers and the work that they're doing, protect the ability of reviewers to have privacy, and to have the faculty submitting for review know that their items are safe and secure and they're being reviewed with all fairness. So this is a hot topic, and stay tuned for more. There'll be additional workshops, I'm sure, as this continues to evolve. But the main takeaway here is to please, work with your faculty members and get them to disclose all sources of foreign contributions, whether it's cash, funding, dollar bills, or if it's in-kind contributions. Okay, well, I hope that's helpful, and I appreciate your time. Thank you again. Bye.